What was one experience in your life that hardened you as a person? Gosh, working in the back of an ambulance, you see so many terrible things. One that does stick with me was a call for a 30-year-old female for suicide. She jumped before we got there, but she was still conscious and very much alive. She hit a balcony on the way down and smashed her arm, huge open fracture. That itself isn't very memorable, but when we got there and got our high-vis jackets on, I looked over to my partner who was a few feet ahead of me, just standing there, shocked. I looked at the patient and she was biting and ripping at her fracture, and I don't know why it fucked me up so bad. Just the notion that someone could be mentally unstable and deranged enough to shred and pull at her own flesh. It was something else. Edit, just for those who were asking, yes, she did survive. She only ended up opening the wound more as she did not have the strength to move the bone at all. She also went unconscious on the way to the hospital. Reading all the other stories from first responders is actually helpful to see. I am just an EMT, and have only been one for 3 years, so knowing that other people have been able to get through similar things help a lot. Smiley face. Delivering ineffectual first aid to an 8-year-old girl who had been crushed against a store wall by a drunk/drugged-up driver. No throwaway. Got molested for 2 years by a football coach. 38 complaints against him. 7 of us went to court. The odds were heavily in his favor. I realized at that time that there is no justice. He got away with it. My grandmother rented my sister and I out to drug dealers for drugs when we were kids. She still haunts my dreams. Getting cheated on when our son was a newborn and I was going through a cancer scare. Then husband ended himself when I found out. I will never trust or love with my whole heart again. The volume of pain he inflicted was just too much. Just one? Taking care of my stepdad while he died of mad cow disease. Runner-up, my bio dad having a degenerative brain disease, PSP, and calling me at work slurring his words. We never had the greatest relationship and I was on the clock and told him I had to go. Had no idea what he was saying. He then wrote down numbers and names of family members and put them in his pocket and drove into a tree. He didn't make it. So I'm police. When I was a rookie patrol officer, I was the first to respond to a father that shot and killed his 12 and 8-year-old sons in front of their mother. Then he shot and killed himself. The 8-year-old was still alive when I got there, but died very soon after. Hardening is both good and bad. PTSD is no joke and I'm living testimony. But someone has to be able to respond to these calls and not lose their cool. And I can do that. First responders, fire/EMS/police, nurses/doctors, and military too kind of have to do a baptism by fire with stuff like this. I'm not unique. My mom being diagnosed with cancer months after my son was born and dying within 2 months was rough. She would have been the best grandma and we all loved her dearly. No only are we no contact with my wife's family, my dad decided getting engaged within a year and hardly spending any time with his new grandson was the best course of action. The summer after my son was born we ended up losing an entire support system other than the occasional visit from a very self-centered old bastard with no shame or honor, and it was the nail in the coffin for my faith in humanity. I was groomed by a man in his 30s when I was 17. Not quite pedo, and 17 was the age of consent where I lived, but looking back the relationship was abusive and manipulative. I've had intimacy issues ever since. My girlfriend kicked me out when she was 3 months pregnant because I didn't make enough money, and told me I'd never see our son. 13 years later, I'm a very involved dad who fought like a bastard for shared custody, and don't regret a thing. Going through benzo withdrawal. I can only describe the feeling as every single day having the worst hangover on top of the worst flu ever, topped off with a feeling of unrelenting chemical terror, depersonalization, suicidal ideation, and waking up every single morning to the worst panic attack. No ounce of relief from this for at least 2 years straight. Then while trying to survive this you lose your business, your house, your friends, your family writes you off, boyfriend cheats on you because you're always sick, your best friend stops talking to you with no explanation, and your 3 beloved dogs all die of various cancers within this time frame. Nothing I go through in life again will come even remotely close to this absolute hell experience. Being harassed in the workplace by a female who was also the boss's friend. It was fucking hell, just hell. I was made to feel like the perpetrator when I sought help, and now 10 years on I still get the occasional email from her. When I was 14, I was walking down our busy road alone in my neighborhood in Albuquerque. I had just had shoulder surgery, my arm was in a sling. A man in a Jeep drove by, then whipped his car around and stopped his car next to me on the side of the road. He screamed at me to get in the car. When I refused, he got out and tried to grab at me. I was not super agile because of my recent surgery, but I managed to dodge away from him for a good minute. At least 20 cars drove by during that and no one stopped to help me. He soon drove away. I will never forget the callousness of those drivers. I am sure they saw what was happening and they chose to look the other way and keep driving. That day, I realized that I can't rely on most people, at least strangers, to help me in my time of need. I was sexually assaulted a few years ago. Right now, I feel weak because I'm scared of men and boys that are bigger than me. I know when I'm older I will heal from this and will make something good out of it. I might try to help raise awareness and help kids that went through something similar. Right now, I'm trying to focus more on my safety, but I'm going to start trying to work on my fears when I feel ready and show people that I can be strong too. I'm still trying to process and understand, but I'm working on it. My mom let me watch Unsolved Mysteries, 60 Minutes, Dateline, and the news every night unsupervised from like age 4. And I had a TV in my room and watched whatever late night stuff was on. That doesn't sound like a huge deal until you realize I was able to understand what they were talking about, and that this was at the high crime peak of the 90s, when they were arresting Jeffrey Dahmer. I would go through the house checking for murderers every night. I'd draw the curtains so they wouldn't get the drop on us. I knew where all the guns in the house were. I also saw so many of these kids killed by their parents and guardians. I couldn't stay with anyone besides my mom without worrying they would rape me or kill me in my sleep. It was horrible and mentally abusive, though they didn't do it to be malicious. My daughter is 6 and can't watch 101 Dalmatians without getting scared, and this is how I know I've done. Got extremely treatable cancer, but insurance wouldn't pay for the surgery and they required 10% up front. I set up a GoFundMe and sent it to everyone in my family and all my friends. Absolutely nothing. Had to sell the few remaining items I owned after my mom sold everything I ever had for drugs before I moved out. No one visited, no helped, a few texts, but that was it. Was out of work for an entire month and had to DoorDash with my stitches and drains in to make rent. It's been about 1.5 years and I've got my finances under control, but I really just can't believe literally everyone lied about being there for me. Never trust anyone. Working a few summers for a public service company that did vacuuming/shopping/laundry for people too infirm to be able to do it themselves, elderly, chronically ill, temporarily or permanently handicapped, etc. Completely changed my mind on religion, or at least religious people and institutions. Over here, religious institutions are basically the only ones making these people feel like they're people and not just burdens. And among those that work for the public service companies and social services, about 50% are highly religious in a country where only 6% regularly go to church. You meet so many people who are miserable, for good reason, that it makes your own problems seem insignificant, and at the same time it hardens you. Sometimes people call me a sociopath because when I discuss misery in all its forms it's dispassionate, focusing on the hows and whys rather than the feelings. But between this, a few years as a volunteer fireman and working in the public school system, well, either you quit or you harden and treat it as a cosmic nihilistic joke, devoid of reason and value, or you harden and become a nurse ratchet, the trope, or you become religious. Between my cousin who I treated like a brother betraying me and ruining my future, and the woman who played with my mind for years, leaving me only to come back and leave again over any little thing when she knew I loved her more than anyone and still do, I think I could be a lot worse honestly. I spent a long time teetering on the edge of oblivion, almost becoming straight up villainous, but ultimately I just lost hope in love and I just avoid certain parts of my family because I still kinda want my cousin dead. Thank you for watching, friend. Until next time, and remember to stay hydrated.